Japan, the land of the rising sun, a place where neon-lit skyscrapers stand beside thousand-year-old shrines and bullet trains glide past sacred mountains. Today, it's one of the most visited countries on Earth, drawing millions every year. But here's the twist. For more than 2 centuries, Japan wasn't welcoming anyone. In fact, its rulers enforced near-total isolation. Foreigners were banned, Japanese citizens couldn't leave, and building ships capable of crossing the ocean? Illegal. This era of seclusion is called sakoku, literally closed country. For over 200 years, Japan thrived on its own, developing unique art, traditions, and social systems that still shape its identity. But before we get to sakoku, we need to rewind. Because Japan's story stretches back tens of thousands of years, from prehistoric settlers to emperors, warlords, and samurai. It's a tale of isolation and contact, of peace and brutal war, of collapse and reinvention. So how did an island nation that once shut the world out become one of the most advanced and globally connected countries today? Let's start at the beginning. The Japanese islands have been inhabited for around 40,000 years. The first settlers crossed from mainland Asia, bringing with them skills like farming and metalworking. Over centuries, these communities grew into early kingdoms. By the 3rd century AD, power consolidated in the Yamato region, and Japan's first emperors emerged. This imperial system, though transformed many times, still exists today. Japan absorbed ideas and technologies from its neighbors. From Korea came Buddhism in 552, reshaping spiritual life. From China came sweeping reforms in 645, reorganizing politics along imperial Chinese lines. And in 794, Emperor Kamu moved the capital to Kyoto. This began the Heian period, which lasted nearly 400 years. It was an age of courtly refinement, literature, and poetry, where classics like the Tale of Genji were written. But while the elite in Kyoto flourished, they neglected the countryside. Power slipped away, setting the stage for centuries of conflict. As the imperial court lost its grip, powerful clans rose in the provinces. Backed by their samurai warriors, they began challenging the old order. In 1185, after years of brutal conflict, the Minamoto clan defeated their rivals and seized power. Just a few years later, Minamoto Yoritomo was appointed shogun, a military ruler who would govern Japan in the emperor's name. In reality, the emperor was reduced to a figurehead. The samurai had become the backbone of Japanese society. Their code of loyalty, honor, and military skill defined politics for centuries to come. But the new regime was soon tested. In the late 1200s, the Mongol Empire, then the largest the world had ever seen, demanded Japan submit as a vassal. When Japan refused, invasion fleets were launched. Twice, samurai fought desperate battles against overwhelming odds. And twice, massive typhoons swept in, wrecking the Mongol fleets. These divine winds, the kamikaze, entered legend. The Mongols never returned, but Japan's defenses nearly bankrupted the shogunate. Discontent brewed, and the fragile balance of power began to fracture once again. By the 1300s, emperors briefly tried to reclaim power, but soon another shogunate took control, the Ashikaga. Their rule was weak, and real power shifted back to regional warlords, the daimyo. These lords controlled their own territories, armies, and alliances. Feuds and betrayals were constant. The breaking point came in 1467 with the Onin War, a succession dispute that spiraled into all-out chaos. For the next century, Japan splintered into rival states locked in near-constant war. This warring states era, known as the Sengoku period, saw new strategies and brutal rivalries. It also saw the rise of unexpected figures, covert ninja agents, Buddhist warrior monks, and ambitious generals clawing for power. Then in 1543, everything shifted. A Portuguese ship blown off course landed on Tanegashima Island. On board, the first Europeans Japan had ever seen, and their cargo included firearms. Within a few years, muskets were being mass-produced and wielded by samurai armies. Warfare would never be the same again. Unification. Amid the chaos, one warlord rose above the rest. Oda Nobunaga. Bold and ruthless, he embraced firearms to devastating effect. Nobunaga conquered rivals and began unifying Japan, but in 1582 he was betrayed and forced to commit suicide. His work was finished by his general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man of humble peasant origins who climbed the ladder all the way to the top. By 1590, Hideyoshi had completed Japan's unification under a single rule, yet even he couldn't keep the peace after his death. In 1600, at the decisive Battle of Sekigahara, Tokugawa Ieyasu crushed his enemies and seized power. 3 years later, he was named shogun. This began the Tokugawa shogunate, an era that would last more than 250 years. A new capital was established in Edo, today's Tokyo. At last, the endless wars were over, and Japan entered one of the most stable eras in its history. The Edo period was marked by peace, prosperity, and order. For the first time in centuries, ordinary people could live without the constant threat of war. Cities grew, agriculture expanded, and Japan's population doubled. Culture flourished too. Kabuki theater drew huge crowds. Woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, captured landscapes and scenes of daily life. Haiku poetry thrived. But this stability came at a price. The Tokugawa shogunate feared foreign influence, especially Christianity, which had spread rapidly since the Portuguese arrival. In 1639, Japan sealed its borders. Sakoku, the closed country policy, was enforced. No Japanese could leave. No foreigners could enter. Trade was strictly limited to the Dutch and Chinese, confined to a single island at Nagasaki. For more than 2 centuries, Japan would develop almost entirely on its own. Isolation brought stability and cultural growth, but eventually the outside world came knocking. Part 7. Cracks in the system. By the late 1700s, cracks began to show. Population growth strained resources. Crop failures led to devastating famines. The government's rigid systems struggled to adapt. At the same time, Western ideas began trickling in through Dutch learning. Scientific and medical texts brought via Nagasaki. Japan was cut off, but not entirely blind. Then, in 1853, a shock. U.S. Commodore Matthew Perry sailed into Edo Bay with a fleet of black ships. His steam-powered warships dwarfed Japan's defenses. Perry demanded Japan open its ports to trade or face force. The shogunate had no choice but to agree. To many Japanese, this was a humiliation. The government appeared weak, unable to defend the country. Discontent boiled over, and soon calls to revere the emperor, expel the barbarians turned into a revolution. The shogunate was collapsing. A new Japan was about to be born. Part 8. The Meiji Restoration. In 1868, the old order was swept away. The young Emperor Meiji was restored to power, and the Tokugawa shogunate was abolished. Japan had chosen a new path. The Meiji leaders knew they had to modernize, or risk being colonized like other Asian nations. So they moved fast. Railways and telegraph lines spread. A new education system was launched. Western-style factories, banks, and legal systems were built almost overnight. Samurai privileges were abolished, replaced by universal conscription. Foreign experts were invited to teach everything from mining and shipbuilding to medicine and law. The pace of change was dizzying. In just a few decades, Japan transformed from a feudal backwater into a modern industrial state, and soon it would flex its new power on the world stage. Part 9. A rising power. Japan's modernization paid off quickly. In 1894, it went to war with China over Korea. The result shocked the world. Japan won decisively, seizing Taiwan and establishing itself as a regional power. 10 years later, Japan clashed with Russia. Few expected a tiny island nation to stand against a European empire. But at battles like Tsushima, Japan's modern navy crushed Russia's fleet. It was the first time in modern history that an Asian nation had defeated a Western one. In 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea. It had joined the ranks of imperial powers. During World War I, Japan fought alongside the Allies and expanded its influence further across the Pacific. By the 1920s, Japan was a rising star, but beneath the surface, nationalist and militarist forces were gaining ground, setting the stage for a far darker chapter. Part 10. Toward World War II. The 1930s were a turning point. Japan's military, now dominant in politics, pushed aggressive expansion. In 1931, it invaded Manchuria. In 1937, full-scale war erupted with China. Brutal campaigns shocked the world. Western powers grew wary. The United States imposed sanctions hoping to check Japan's expansion. But instead of backing down, Japan doubled down. In 1940, it allied with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Then in December 1941, Japan made a fateful choice. Its navy launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, aiming to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The gamble worked, at first, but it also ensured that America would enter the war. World War II in the Pacific had begun. Part 11. The Pacific War. In the early months, Japan swept across Asia and the Pacific. Hong Kong, Singapore, the Philippines, territory after territory fell. At its height, Japan controlled a vast empire. But the tide soon turned. The U.S. and its allies launched a relentless island-hopping campaign, retaking territory step by step. Battles like Midway and Guadalcanal shattered Japan's momentum. By 1945, defeat was certain, but Japan refused to surrender. The prospect of a bloody invasion loomed. Then came a weapon unlike any before. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Over 100,000 people died instantly. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation, announcing Japan's surrender. World War II was over. Part 12. Rebirth. In the aftermath, Japan lay in ruins. Its cities burned, economy shattered, and millions homeless. Allied forces occupied the country, led by U.S. General Douglas MacArthur. Sweeping reforms followed. The emperor renounced his divine status. A new democratic constitution was written. The military was disbanded. Instead of conquest, Japan's focus turned to rebuilding. With American aid and its own relentless work ethic, Japan surged forward. By the 1960s, it had recovered and was booming. Automobiles, electronics, and consumer goods carried the label "Made in Japan" around the world. By the 1980s, Japan had the second largest economy on Earth. A nation devastated by war had reinvented itself as an economic powerhouse. Part 13. Japan today. Modern Japan is a blend of contrasts. It's a place where Shinto shrines stand beside skyscrapers, where ancient rituals thrive alongside cutting-edge robotics. It has one of the world's largest economies, longest life expectancies, and richest cultural legacies. Yet it also carries the memory of past hardships, centuries of isolation, waves of conflict, and the devastation of war. Japan's story is one of resilience and reinvention. From isolation to global stage, from ruin to renewal, from a closed country to one of the most open and influential nations in the world. This is Japan's history, and its journey is far from over.